There comes a time in life, quiet, cruel, and often hidden from the eyes of the world, when everything around you starts to collapse. Not with thunderous noise, but in the most terrifying way possible, with silence. The phone stops ringing, the people you loved stop reaching out, the ones you trusted begin to twist your words, turn their backs, and carry on with their lives as if your presence never mattered. You look around and suddenly the walls you built with years of loyalty and care are crumbling under the weight of questions that have no answers. You ask yourself, why? Why did they hurt me? Why did they lie? Why did the ones I gave everything to walk away as if I meant nothing? You cry out in prayer, not once but night after night, wondering when the voice of God will echo back. But it does, at least not in the way you expect. Instead, the silence grows louder, the darkness deeper, and the pain more personal. It's in these moments that trusting God feels like the hardest thing to do. When life doesn't make sense, when everything is upside down, when the people who did you wrong are celebrating while you're trying to breathe through your own tears, how can you possibly trust? And yet, this is exactly the moment where trust must begin. Not the kind of trust that's easy, not the kind that floats on blessings and breakthroughs. No, this is the trust that costs you something. This is the trust that asks you to stand still while your enemies seem to march ahead. It asks you to forgive when your heart wants revenge. It calls you to believe that justice is on its way, even when every sign says otherwise. The world teaches you to trust when it's comfortable, to believe when things are visible, and to worship when life is good. But the truth is, real faith is born in the fire of confusion. Real trust is forged in the silence of unanswered prayers. And God, yes, the same God who seems silent now, is often working most when he appears to be absent. Have you ever considered that the pain you're in might be sacred? That your suffering might be part of a larger story, where God is writing something you cannot yet understand? What if the betrayal wasn't just about people being cruel, but about God removing what was never meant to stay? What if the heartbreak was protection? What if the silence is preparation? Because sometimes God will not explain what he's doing, not yet. Because if he did, your heart wouldn't be able to bear the weight of the glory he's preparing for you. Sometimes he allows confusion because it forces you to surrender. And in that surrender, trust is not just an option. It becomes the only way forward. Trusting God when life makes sense is gratitude. Trusting God when life doesn't make sense, that is worship. You are not forgotten. You are not being punished. You are being shaped, refined, tested like gold in a furnace. And while the people who wounded you may think they've won, what they cannot see is the divine justice moving beneath the surface. Karma may be invisible, but it is not inactive. There is a reckoning in the works, not out of revenge, but out of divine balance. So yes, life might not make sense right now, but God still does. He still sees. He still knows. He still heals. And if you dare to trust him now, not when the skies are blue, but when your world is dark, then you will witness a restoration so powerful, even your enemies will fall silent. So, if you've ever asked, how can I trust God when everything is falling apart? Then listen closely, because the journey to divine restoration begins with these truths. Your pain has a purpose you can't see yet. There are moments in life when the pain becomes so unbearable, so suffocating, that it feels like your soul is being crushed under the weight of betrayal. You question everything, your worth, your choices, your faith. You replay conversations in your head, trying to make sense of why someone you trusted, someone you loved, someone you stood by, could look you in the eyes and lie, could smile in your face and then turn around and destroy your name, your peace, your spirit. You sit in silence, not because you have nothing to say, but because words no longer make sense in a world that feels so wrong. You think to yourself, what did I do to deserve this? You look at your broken heart, your wounded trust, your shattered dreams, and all you see is ruin. The people who caused this pain go on with their lives, laughing, posting, smiling, as if your tears never mattered, as if your loyalty was a joke to them. And you wonder, God, how can you allow this? How could you see me fall to pieces and still remain silent? But what if the silence isn't abandonment? What if the pain you're in is not punishment, but a process? What if this chapter of suffering is not a curse, but a sacred shaping? You see, it's easy to trust the plan when it's working in your favor. But what about when the plan hurts? What about when God allows people to walk away without explanation? What about when He strips away the very things you begged Him to keep? That is where real trust begins. That is where faith is tested, not when life is smooth, but when your world is burning and heaven seems far away. Have you ever noticed that the most painful moments are also the ones that reveal the most truth? When people show you who they really are, when the masks fall off, when false love is exposed, you don't see it at first because your heart is too broken to notice. But in time, if you keep trusting, you'll realize that the pain served a purpose. It opened your eyes. It taught you discernment. It revealed the truth you refused to accept when things were comfortable. And maybe, just maybe, the reason you had to go through it so deeply was because your destiny is greater than your comfort. You were meant to grow through this, not just to survive it, but to become someone you never could have become if they hadn't betrayed you, if they hadn't walked away, if they hadn't lied. It took that pain to push you into your purpose. God never wastes pain. What you see as destruction, He sees as construction. You look at your broken pieces and grieve, but He looks at those same pieces and begins to build. And what He builds through suffering is always stronger than what was built through ease. Yes, you cried. Yes, they left. Yes, it broke you. But no, it wasn't in vain. Sometimes the pain is the tool that pries your hands away from what you were never meant to hold. Sometimes it takes heartbreak to clear the path for healing. And though it doesn't make sense right now, there will come a day, maybe not today, maybe not even tomorrow, but one day, when you will look back and thank God for not giving you what you thought you wanted, because that pain you hated became the very fire that purified your soul. It taught you strength. It taught you boundaries. It taught you self-respect. Your pain is not your identity. It is the soil in which your transformation is planted. And though it looks barren now, something is growing. Quietly, powerfully, purposefully. Trust the process, even when it feels like punishment. Because behind every tear you've cried is a lesson being written by a God who never abandons, even when it hurts to believe. God removes to protect, not to punish. It's one of the most painful things in life to watch someone you once prayed for turn into the very reason you cry yourself to sleep. To see someone you loved so fiercely become a stranger. You gave them every part of yourself, your time, your trust, your secrets, your loyalty, and in return they gave you silence, betrayal, distance. One day they were everything to you, the next they vanished, like your presence never mattered. And in that void you are left holding questions that won't stop screaming inside your head. You ask, why would God allow this? Why would He bring someone into my life only to let them break me? What you don't realize in those agonizing moments is that sometimes God allows people to leave because their presence was delaying your destiny. Sometimes the very people you fight to keep are the ones standing in the way of your growth. And because you refuse to let go, God removes them, not to hurt you, but to save you. It never feels like protection in the beginning. No, it feels like punishment, like rejection, like abandonment. But in reality, it's a divine intervention dressed in disappointment. God sees things you don't. He hears the conversations you're not invited to. He knows the intentions behind every smile, the truth behind every "I care about you," the lies hidden behind every promise. And when he sees that your heart is in danger, when he sees that someone's presence will poison your peace, delay your calling, or corrupt your spirit, he doesn't wait for your approval, he moves. You may see a breakup, a betrayal, a lost friendship, but God sees a rescue. You begged him to bless that relationship. You fasted for it. You prayed for it. You stayed loyal long after you were disrespected, and still God took it away. And now all you can feel is the sting of loss. But you need to know this, that loss was mercy in disguise. God didn't take them because he wanted to see you suffer. He took them because he knew you would never become who you were meant to be with them still in your life. We don't often admit this, but sometimes we are more loyal to pain than we are to purpose. We stay where we are wounded. We tolerate what breaks us. We settle for companionship, even if it comes with betrayal, because the fear of being alone feels louder than the red flags waving in our face. So God steps in. He tears it down so he can rebuild. He removes so he can redeem. But it takes time for the heart to catch up to what the soul already knows. In the beginning, you'll question everything. You'll miss them. You'll cry for them. You'll hope they come back and apologize. But over time, if you allow healing to do its work, you'll start to see why God allowed the separation. You'll notice the peace that returned to your life. You'll realize how heavy that relationship really was, how much energy you spent trying to be enough, how often you betrayed your own boundaries to keep someone who was never meant to stay. And slowly, painfully, the truth will begin to settle in your heart. They didn't leave you. God removed them, not to punish you, but to protect you from what you couldn't see, from the betrayal that would have come later, from the destruction that was hiding behind their charm, from the delay that would have cost you your destiny. You didn't lose. You were saved. Divine timing always exposes the hidden truths. There's a strange kind of suffering that comes from confusion. Not the pain of loss, not the sting of betrayal, but the ache of not knowing why. Why did they change so suddenly? Why did they lie when all you gave was the truth? Why did you feel something wasn't right, but couldn't prove it? This confusion becomes a quiet torment. You lie awake at night, replaying conversations, rereading messages, trying to find the moment it all shifted. But no matter how hard you search, clarity refuses to come. You're left stumbling through the fog of unanswered questions, feeling blind and broken. It is in these seasons that we feel most abandoned by justice. It looks like the people who did wrong are thriving. They seem untouchable, protected, even celebrated. Meanwhile, you, the one who was honest, loyal, sincere, are sitting in silence, trying to rebuild from the ruins they left behind. You start to believe maybe the truth will never come to light. Maybe they'll get away with it. Maybe the lies they told will become the version of the story everyone believes. But divine timing is never rushed. It's never loud. It doesn't show up when your emotions demand answers. It waits. It observes. It lets the story play out longer than you think is fair, but when it arrives, when divine timing decides that the hour of revelation has come, it uncovers everything. Not a single hidden intention, whispered deception, or fake mask is left standing. God doesn't just reveal facts, he reveals character. He lets time unfold in such a way that people expose themselves. The ones who lied begin to contradict themselves. The ones who pretended to be innocent can no longer carry the weight of their deception. Life has a way of peeling back the layers, and what once was hidden in charm and manipulation starts to rot under the light of truth. You don't always see it right away, because truth doesn't always rush in with a bang. It creeps in through pattern, through changes, through consequences. Suddenly, the same people who once looked untouchable start stumbling. Their words no longer hold power. Their actions begin to reveal what their words once hid. And without you lifting a single finger, without you trying to prove yourself, divine timing does the work you couldn't do. It is not revenge, it's not spite, it's balance. There's something sacred in watching the truth reveal itself on its own. You don't have to scream. You don't have to beg people to believe you. You just have to endure the season of silence, trusting that what is true will not stay buried forever. It may take time. It may break your heart to wait, but when God moves, He leaves no stone unturned. And the same people who convinced others you were the problem will be seen in their true form. The silence you endured was not God's absence, it was His strategy, because had He revealed the truth too soon, you may have stayed. You may have fought for people who were never fighting for you. You may have excused the behavior, justified the betrayal, and held on longer than you should have. But by letting time reveal what words could not, God protected you not only from them, but from yourself. Divine timing does more than expose lies. It delivers justice wrapped in clarity. It gives you answers without requiring revenge. It restores your peace without needing an apology. And it shows everyone, including you, that no matter how convincing the deception may have been, the truth always knows how to rise. Faith grows strongest in darkness, not in light. There's something terrifying about silence, when your prayers go unanswered, when your cries for help seem to bounce off the walls, when the heavens feel shut and your soul is drowning in quiet despair. You reach out for a sign, a word, a flicker of hope, but all you get is darkness. Not the kind that comes with the night, but the kind that settles inside your chest. A darkness that no one sees, yet it follows you into every room. You smile through it, you function through it, but inside there's a gnawing ache that won't go away. You begin to question the very foundation of your beliefs. You wonder if faith is even worth it. You see people who cheat, lie, and manipulate walking around blessed and unbothered, while you, who gave everything to walk in truth, are barely holding yourself together. You think back to all the times you trusted, all the moments you chose integrity over ease, all the prayers you whispered in the stillness of the night. And now, with everything falling apart, you silently ask, was it all in vain? This is the part no one talks about. This is where real faith begins. Not in church pews or under stage lights, not when life is smooth and full of blessings. No. Faith takes root in the raw places, in the nights of confusion, in the weeks of silence, in the months of unanswered questions. Faith is not forged in comfort, it is born in conflict. When God strips away the people you relied on, when He closes the doors you thought were meant to open, when nothing makes sense and every plan you made falls apart, that's when your faith is tested. Not because God is cruel, but because He wants to show you that what you built your life upon was too fragile, that your foundation was made of temporary things, that your hope was tied to people who were never meant to carry it. You see, it's easy to have faith when everything goes your way. It's easy to believe when prayers are answered quickly. But that's not real faith, that's gratitude. Real faith is built in the dark. Real faith holds on when everything screams, let go. Real faith doesn't demand proof, it clings to promise. Not the kind of promise written in clear letters, but the quiet one that whispers, I'm still here even when you don't see me. It is in the darkness that you learn who you really are. When everything external is removed, you are forced to confront what remains inside. And that's when God begins to speak. Not always in words, but in strength. you didn't know you had, in peace that makes no sense, in survival when you thought you wouldn't make it another day. Those who walk by sight will never understand this level of faith, because this kind of trust cannot be explained. It must be lived. It must be bled through, cried through, wrestled through. It's the kind of faith that says, even if nothing changes, I will still believe. Not because your circumstances are good, but because you believe that God is. And slowly, as you keep walking, something begins to shift. Not always around you, but inside you. The pain doesn't break you anymore. The silence doesn't scare you. The betrayal doesn't define you. You begin to realize that you've become stronger, not because life became easier, but because you stopped needing the light to believe that the sun still exists. This is where faith becomes more than a word. It becomes your oxygen. Karma moves quietly, but it never misses. There's a peculiar kind of torment in watching those who hurt you live freely, as if they did nothing wrong. The ones who broke your heart, disrespected your loyalty, tarnished your name, and betrayed you in the deepest way possible. They walk around without shame. You see them smiling, celebrating, achieving, while you're still trying to gather the shattered pieces of your soul. You wonder how someone can cause so much pain and suffer so little. How they can be so cruel and still get applauded by the world. You think to yourself, where is justice? Why does life reward the wrong people? Why am I the one in pain while they continue with joy? It feels like injustice on a spiritual level. And the ache is not just from the betrayal, it's from the silence that follows. You want someone to speak up for you. You want someone to call out the lies. You want to see the scales of justice tip back in your favor. But day after day, it seems like your cries go unheard, and that is where the danger of bitterness creeps in. But you must understand one thing: karma is not in a rush. Divine justice does not operate on human timelines. It doesn't announce itself or post its arrival. It doesn't always make noise. It works in the quiet, in the hidden, in the stillness where no one is looking. And though it may seem like nothing is happening on the surface, something is always happening underneath. Karma is the law of return, not just a spiritual cliche, but a divine mechanism written into the fabric of the universe. What a person sows, whether in secret or in public, they will eventually reap. Not maybe, not possibly, they will. You might not be there to witness it. You might not get the apology. You might never see them fall. But life has a way of bringing everyone to account, especially those who inflict pain on others without remorse. You see, people can only outrun consequences for so long. They might deceive others, manipulate appearances, and pretend to be innocent, but they can never deceive the one who sees all. And that's where karma is different from revenge. Revenge wants to control. Karma simply waits. It lets people dig their own graves, one lie at a time. It watches silently as their smiles fade into loneliness. Their fake peace turns into sleepless nights, and their success becomes a burden too heavy to carry. You might think they're winning, but what you don't see is the decay inside their soul. The emptiness they carry, the fear they suppress, the guilt they avoid. Because no one escapes the mirror of their own actions. Sooner or later, life brings it back. Not to destroy, but to balance. To restore what was unjustly taken, to expose what was covered, and to humble those who once took pride in their cruelty. What's even more powerful is that karma rarely delivers in the way people expect. It doesn't always come in the form of failure or public shame. Sometimes it shows up through the one thing they can't fix, the loss of peace. They wake up anxious. They live in fear of being exposed. Their relationships suffer. Their success becomes hollow. The joy they once faked becomes impossible to maintain. And all the while, you, the one they tried to break, begin to rise, quietly, slowly but surely. There's a special kind of justice in watching the person who tried to bury you realize they planted a seed. They thought they ended your story, but all they did was give it a darker chapter. A chapter that would lead to your strength, your clarity, your rebirth. And that is something karma does better than any revenge ever could. It not only restores what you lost, it allows you to watch how they lose what they once took for granted. They'll never say it out loud, but deep down they'll know. They messed with the wrong heart. They took from the wrong soul. They wounded someone covered by grace. And there's no escape from that. No way to undo the spiritual debt they've created. So even if you don't see it, even if they're still smiling, even if life hasn't caught up to them yet, know this. Karma is always working, quietly, justly, not driven by hate, but guided by truth. And the day will come when everything they gave returns to them in full measure, not because you wished it, but because that is the law of life, and no one, not even the most clever deceiver, can rewrite that law. God's silence is not absence, it's strategy. There is a haunting kind of silence that falls over your life when you need God the most. You kneel in prayer, your voice shaking, your heart desperate, tears soaking your pillow. But heaven seems still. No answer, no sign, no shift, just quiet. It's in those long, aching silences that the mind becomes its own battlefield. You begin to wonder if your prayers ever left the room. You start questioning whether God even heard you, or worse, if He's chosen to ignore you. You say to yourself, if God truly cared, wouldn't He speak? Wouldn't He send a sign, a word, something? But the silence stretches on like a never-ending night, and the more time passes, the more you feel abandoned, forgotten, invisible. This is where most people lose hope, not in the pain itself, but in the silence that follows. Because silence feels like absence, it feels like neglect, and it whispers lies that make you believe you're on your own. But that's the trick of darkness. It tries to convince you that silence means God has left, when in truth, His silence is not absence, it is strategy. You see, God is not like people. He doesn't always respond with noise, with urgency, with emotion. He operates in ways that require trust, not explanation. When God is silent, He's not inactive. He's working in places you cannot see, moving pieces you don't know exist, and preparing outcomes you're not yet ready to receive. The silence is not a delay, it's a design. When a teacher gives an exam, they go silent, not because they've abandoned the student, but because they've already taught what needed to be known. The silence doesn't mean the teacher is gone. It means the test is in progress. In the same way, when God is silent in your life, it doesn't mean He's withdrawn His hand. It means He's watching you apply what you've already learned, watching you walk through what must be walked alone, watching you trust even when there's no reassurance. Think about how often in life we rely on noise to feel secure. We seek constant validation, constant signs, constant movement. But true faith is proven in the absence of all that. It's easy to trust when things are loud and clear. It's easy to believe when prayers are answered fast. But what happens when the heavens don't respond? What happens when you've cried, pleaded, fasted, and still nothing? That is the moment when God is building something inside you. He is stretching your capacity. He is strengthening your soul. He is burning away the dependence on feelings and deepening your reliance on truth. And maybe the silence isn't just for your strength. Maybe it's also for their exposure. God's silence gives people the time and space to reveal who they truly are. While you wait, He lets them lie. He lets them smile while hiding betrayal. He lets them walk like they've won. Because the longer He waits, the more truth unfolds. the more their mask begins to slip, the more they expose themselves without you ever needing to lift a hand. That's the brilliance of divine silence. It's never wasted. It's a setup, not a setback. God sees every move being made in darkness, and while you're asking for immediate answers, He's preparing something far greater, something that will not only vindicate you, but silence every voice that spoke against you. But for that to happen, the silence must remain, for now. What you think is delay is actually protection. What you think is God ignoring your pain is Him preserving your promise. And what you assume is abandonment is actually the most calculated move in a divine strategy that favors you in the end. Because had God spoken too soon, you might have run back to what was destroying you. Had He answered too quickly, you might have settled for less than what He planned. Had He revealed His hand too early, you might not have had the strength to hold what He was about to give. So yes, it hurts. Yes, the silence feels unbearable. But inside that silence, God is working in ways that don't make sense now, but will one day make you drop to your knees in awe. There comes a moment, usually after you've tried everything, begged everyone, cried your heart dry, when your soul simply gives out. Not because you've stopped caring, but because you've exhausted every ounce of your strength trying to hold together something that was never yours to carry. You sit alone, in the stillness of your suffering, staring at the pieces of a life that once made sense. You've replayed every choice, every word, every red flag you ignored. You've tried to fix what broke. You've tried to understand why it happened. But nothing brings clarity. Nothing brings closure, and that's when it hits you. You are not in control. And that realization is terrifying. We're raised to believe that if we do everything right, life will reward us. If we love deeply, we'll be loved back. If we work hard, we'll be successful. If we pray enough, God will answer quickly. But life, in its brutal honesty, shatters that illusion. Because there are moments, dark, gut-wrenching moments, when you do everything right, and still, it all falls apart. The relationship fails, the friend betrays, the promotion goes to someone else, the door you prayed to open stays shut. You try to bargain with life, try to control the outcome through effort, kindness, faithfulness, but nothing bends in your favor. You're left feeling powerless, like a passenger in a vehicle moving in a direction you didn't choose. And it's in that space, where your hands are off the wheel and your heart is full of fear, that God quietly begins to speak. Not in thunder, not in fire, but in a gentle, soul-deep whisper. Let go. But letting go feels like giving up. It feels like surrendering to chaos, like admitting defeat. We resist it because control gives us the illusion of safety. If we can control the outcome, maybe we won't get hurt again. Maybe they won't leave. Maybe we can prevent the betrayal before it comes. But here's the truth you must face. Control is not protection. It's prison. It ties your peace to outcomes you cannot guarantee. It forces your joy to depend on people you cannot change. It makes your healing conditional upon circumstances that may never work out the way you want them to. And so, you live in anxiety. You wake up heavy, not because anything went wrong today, but because you're bracing for what might. You're exhausted, not from life itself, but from holding everything so tightly. From trying to control people's opinions, their loyalty, their love, from trying to fix what God allowed to fall. You're wearing yourself out spiritually because your soul was not designed to manage what only God can carry. True peace, deep, unshakable peace, doesn't come from everything going your way. It comes from finally understanding that even if nothing goes your way, you will still be okay. Not because you figured it all out, but because you surrendered the need to. It's the moment you stop begging for clarity and start trusting in purpose. It's the moment you stop trying to force people to stay and start accepting that if they left, they were never meant to go where you're headed. Letting go doesn't mean you don't care. It means you finally believe that God cares more than you ever could. It means you accept that your understanding has limits, but His wisdom is infinite. It means you make peace with the fact that not all storms will be calmed, some will be ridden through, and sometimes the greatest act of faith is not believing for a miracle. It's sitting in the middle of the mess and choosing not to panic. But this kind of surrender isn't easy. It requires grieving the version of life you thought you would have. It requires releasing the story you wrote for yourself and accepting the one God is writing, even when you can't read the next chapter. It requires facing your deepest fear that if you let go, things might get worse. But here's what you'll find when you do. Things might not change immediately, but you will. You'll stop forcing conversations with people who never listened. You'll stop trying to prove your worth to those who only ever saw your weakness. You'll stop begging life to be fair and start focusing on becoming whole. You'll finally have space in your heart to breathe again. Not because the situation got better, but because you stopped needing it to in order to feel peace. This is the paradox of surrender. It feels like loss at first, but it's really freedom. It feels like weakness, but it's the greatest strength. Because when you stop trying to control everything, you create room for God to move, room for divine justice, room for unseen protection, room for the restoration you never could have orchestrated on your own. You'll look back one day and realize that the moment everything felt like it was falling apart was actually the moment everything began to come together, but not under your control, under His. There will always be seasons in life when nothing makes sense, when betrayal feels deeper than love, when silence feels louder than prayer, and when confusion clouds every step forward. You may not understand why the people you trusted turned against you, why God allowed the pain, or why the road ahead feels so uncertain. But understand this: your story is not over, and your suffering has not gone unseen. What broke you will not define you, what left you will not diminish you, and what confused you will not consume you, because even in the silence God was working, even in the betrayal He was protecting, even in the delay He was preparing. You weren't forgotten, you were being positioned for something greater, for something lasting, for something sacred. You may never get the apology, you may never hear them admit the damage they caused, but you will get peace, you will get healing, you will get restoration. God's way. So stop chasing closure from people who are never capable of honesty. Stop looking for signs in places God has already removed His hand. Stop clinging to pain as if it's proof of your worth, and start trusting the one who never needed to explain His love to prove it. Let them go. Let the questions go. Let the bitterness go. Let the bitterness and trust. Trust that God saw every tear. Trust that karma never misses its mark. Trust that the peace you've been begging for is waiting on the other side of surrender. Even when life doesn't make sense, God always does. And when it's all said and done, you'll look back, not with anger, not with regret, but with a quiet strength that says, He was with me the whole time. So walk forward, not with fear, not with control, but with trust. Because when life is at its most confusing, that's when God is most near.